from the mainstream perspective, but at the same time expose the student with selected macroeconomic concepts and issues from the Islamic perspective. So we do this in a way in which we hope other courses in economic theory as well as other related courses, for example, public finance, money and banking, human resource development, and other related components of the program can provide even further discussion on the Islamic economic inputs to the macroeconomic concepts and theories that we have exposed the students to in this course. Okay, so the next slide on the course assessment. So 50% of the course assessment are considered under the continuous assessment component, which may include quizzes, assignments, or exercises or problem sets, presentation, as well as mid-semester examination, while the remaining 50% will come from the final exam. For instance, for this semester, now the students are waiting for their exam to start. We have 10% for quizzes, 10% for assignment, another 10% for group presentation, and 20% for mid-semester examination. Okay, slide 5 on the course outline. So we have altogether 10 topics covered under these principles of macroeconomics. Macroeconomic overview, measurement of domestic output, basic macroeconomic relationship, and then we move into two models. The first one, aggregate expenditure models, and the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. Then we move into two important policies in macroeconomics, fiscal policy and also the monetary policy. So before we talk about the monetary policy framework, first we introduce the students with the important background in terms of money, financial institution, money creation, and the financial system as a whole. And finally, towards the end, topic 10 talks about the international trade, balance of payment, as well as some discussion on exchange rates. Slide 6. So for this course, since we focus more on the mainstream economic theory for the preparation of the students to understand the macroeconomic theory in detail, we are using McDonald, Brew and Pitt. This is the textbook that we have used for many years, and therefore, even though now we have another textbook published with the contributions from many of us here as well, Islamic Economics, Principles and Analysis, published in 2018. I believe this is the first comprehensive textbook with Islamic perspective that we have in the world. But even so, many of our instructors in the course maintain their opinion on still having McDonald, Brew and Flint as the main reference for this course. And we actually share this textbook between Principles of Micro and Principles of Macroeconomics. Therefore, if we have 5 instructors in Principles of Macroeconomics, another 5 or 6 in Principles of Macroeconomics, so we have quite a number of people to convince if we were to change to another reference book. And then the next slide, slide. Okay, so this is the key component of our presentation today, which are the approaches and the contents of Islamic inputs that we integrate into Principles of Macroeconomics. Actually, we have 2 components. If we refer back to the the learning outcome of the course, as I highlighted earlier, there are 2 areas. One is on understanding the macroeconomic concepts, and the other one is to look at macroeconomic conditions and policies that can improve the well-being of the people, including among the Muslim countries. Based on that, we have two components here. The first component is to look at the mainstream economic concepts from an Islamic perspective. We can do this by having these three steps. Yeah. So after we have discussed the concept from the mainstream perspective, we can examine this concept from the Islamic perspective and what kind of assumptions or institutions or values which are not in line with Islamic perspectives, as I've highlighted by Prof. Nomar earlier in her presentation. And secondly, after critically evaluating those assumptions, values, and concepts, we then introduce the alternative concepts, values, and institutions from Islamic perspective. And finally, we can highlight the overall implications of this by introducing the Islamic perspectives, the values, the concept, and the institutions that we have in Islamic economics. What would be the implication? What have changed in terms of the outcome? For example, in the paper, we give an example in the case of the circular flow of income and expenditure model. So the circular flow model provides us with an intuitive framework how we can understand the whole macroeconomic from the computation of GDP, GDP from the expenditure approach, income approach, and production approach. They are all able to be understood through the flows of money and goods available in the circular flow model. In addition to that, we can also understand the framework of fiscal policy through the leakages and injections from government spending and taxation, as well as the monetary policy through the functions of savings and investment in the economy. So by evaluating the circular flow model, we can identify few things which may not be in line with Islamic principles. For example, the focus was given more on the market-based transactions, where non-market-based transactions were omitted. For example, voluntary activities, charities, giving behavior, helping others were not included in the indicators of well-being. Similarly, activities in the informal sector was excluded, even though we recognize in an Islamic economic system where the emphasis is given on promoting the well-being of the people, particularly in the promotion of the well-being of the lower income groups. So informal sector is more close to the activities of the lower income group. Therefore, giving the emphasis on this sector would be the most appropriate policy in Islamic economics. And then after that, we can identify the implications. How can the third sector play an important role in providing a social welfare system and a social safety net system that can supplement other sectors in the economy. The second approach is looking at the macroeconomic conditions of Muslim countries. Because when we look at the literature of Islamic economics, the goals of Islamic economics that were identified by the first generation, like Professor Chapra, Professor Siddiqui, are related to like poverty eradication, education and human capital, equal opportunity to all, sustainable development, moral excellence. These are all normative goals of Islamic economics, and many of these objectives are overlapping with the topics discussed in macroeconomics, and therefore providing perspective of macroeconomic conditions of the Muslim countries is our second approach in incorporating the Islamic input. Given that there is a large topics that we cover in mainstream, as well as the Islamic inputs that we also need to integrate, we tend to use time outside class hours. We call this self-learning time. And we have reading assignments, group assignment, as well as presentation. For example, in the group assignment, we ask them to find data from the World Development Indicator, for example, and rank countries according to their GDP and GDP per capita, and make observations in terms of the conditions of the Muslim countries. So this will give them some idea to what extent the development stages or levels of our Muslim Ummah. And then in the presentation as well, we ask them to make presentation on things like limitations of GDP and the alternative perspective of well-being, for example, the Makassar-based index, and so on. So I pass the floor to Dr. Isan for the remaining two components of the paper.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Ihsan from the Department of Economics, International Studies in Malaysia. So I'll try to go through my topics. And in topic number one, specifically, because this is combinations between the two mainstream and also Islamic components. Specifically, this is where we're gonna try to highlight and also share with the students on the philosophical backgrounds of the Islamic economics by presenting to them, the comparison between different economic systems that we have. And then partly we also try to present and also introduce to the students the context of the third sector, the role that needs to be played by the third sector in the circular flow model is very important, and that is also where we bring in the Islamic element. In topic number two, specifically this is where we try to highlight in response to the limitations of GDP measurement, whereby here we're going to try to present alternative measures of well-being from Islamic perspective. And we're also going to introduce some of the index available. For instance, the IDEX, Integrated Development Index, which is based on Makassar. And we also have another index, what we call as Islamic Human Development Index. Those are basically just to give a quick understanding to students that apart from the conventional index, we also have some indices that are taking into account the Islamic perspective. And secondly, we're also gonna get the students to basically explore more in terms of the economic performance, particularly among Muslim countries. So this is where we'll get the students to do some assignments or group work where they're gonna look through what are the economic compositions in different countries and how different countries, among the Muslim regions, basically perform relative to one another, and so that we can also make comparisons with the other counterpart. The third topic will be on the business cycles, economic growth, and also instability. The way how we approach, we try to basically highlight the scenario based on the historical environment that had happened for the past few decades, particularly the context of global financial crisis and also Asian financial crisis, how the speculative behavior, particularly that's mainly contributed by the interest-based credit system that we have under conventional, leads to economic severity and also recession in the global market. Topic number 4, when we talk about the basic macroeconomic relationship, we also try to bring in the component of Islamic redistributive tools. So this is where we're going to highlight also the role of infaq, zakah, as well as wakaf, to show how important all these tools to make sure that it can give a better impact to the economy. And this is also where we going to introduce to the students the Islamic perspective on investment, particularly on the equity-based profit loss sharing instead of fixed return. On fiscal policy, the things that we try to integrate will be looking more on what are the guiding principles in government spending. So this is where we're also going to highlight the concept of moderation and also priority. Okay, the importance of having some understanding on fiqh al-awlawiyat, for instance, in making decisions from the perspective of policy makers. And we also try to integrate the role of zakah in fiscal policy in the context of how zakah could play a role in achieving relative efficiency, redistributions of income, stabilization goal, as well as economic growth and development. And topic number money and financial system and manipulation. Again, here we try to highlight the impacts of debt-based monetary system, what could be the implications, how it affects the world, how it leads to global financial crisis, all those basically among the things that we share with students. And we also try to introduce a bit of discussion on the concept of digital currency as well as cryptocurrency from the perspective of Sharia. And then the last two topics, let me just go a bit quickly here. On the part of monetary policy, the focus will be more on understanding the objective of monetary policy, which not just to fulfill the needs in achieving the macroeconomic goals, but what more important is to fulfill and also to serve the communities largely, okay? Mainly to generate economic welfare so that the Ummah can basically sustain and also achieve better performance. The final topic, international economics, this is where, based on the assignment given to the students, whereby they have to explore the kind of cooperation and also trade that we have among Muslim countries. So you can see that from this aspect, it's not the approach is not on the theoretical side, but it's more of the contemporary and also the economic environment that we have today, so that we can evaluate and we can also understand what are the limitations that we have, how we can basically move forward, particularly to improve the conditions of Muslim countries. And just to conclude, some of the challenges that I would like to share here. I believe some of these challenges might also be the one that you are facing in other universities as well. Specifically in our university, when we talk about teaching Islamic economics, the issue of quantity and also quality of human resources, most of them are basically trained in conventional economics. And to get the new generations to basically involve and start teaching, this is one of the challenge. And getting people to also have greater confidence to start teaching certain elements of Islamic economics in their syllabus is also a challenge. But I believe that this is where better coordination needs to be arranged so that new lecturers especially to be given the opportunity to join classes and also to get more session with their peers so that they can learn a little bit more in terms of the Islamic context in economics. Secondly, in terms of the participants, the students who are having different backgrounds, because not all of them are basically coming from economics background. Some of them are science students, and some of them are Sharia students. So when it comes to managing the pace in giving the lecture, okay, this becomes a challenge because the lecturers will have to slow down the pace to make sure that different students could follow the lecture. And in a way, sometimes it take up so much time, and then the time that we have to cover the Islamic component will become very limited. And we are talking about 14 weeks in a semester, and within that 14 weeks, there are also in-class presentation, and that is where there is a need to better organize and also to have a proper way how to embed the Islamic components. The final one is in terms of the reference material. I think what is important here is some of those references are coming from different articles and also book chapters. So there is a need in a way that the lecturers will have to compile and to also prepare to make sure that it's available for the students. And although we have one of a good book that look at the Islamic economics by Isra, but because this is again an additional book required, so it incur additional cost to the students as well, and this is where in a way it limit in terms of how we could access and how we can split out the elements of Islamic economics to students. So I think that's all, just to share the brief idea in terms of what we cover in class. And inshallah, in the afternoon session or tomorrow session, we can discuss better so that we can coordinate in terms of the particular. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.